Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, a discursive exploration of the idiosyncratic and oft inexplicable impetus behind comedy's perennial proclivity for public persiflage. Each episode we hear stories about what it's like to chase laughs for a living, the highs, the lows, the weird gigs, the passion that keeps them going, and the little quirks that make comedy their own. I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 1,800 different comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. Please also take a moment to like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is a critically acclaimed writer, podcaster and comedian, now based in Edinburgh, who in recent years has received a Best Podcast nomination from Chortle and the Scottish Comedy Award. It's comedian Liam Withnail. Why don't we start at the beginning then? How was comedy as an influence on you growing up?
I was 6 years old. Or maybe I was a little bit older. I was 6 or 7, around that age. Young person. I was a kid, I should say. And I watched the film Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, which I was excited to watch because it was a 12A and I'd been allowed to watch it. And I just thought he was the funniest man on planet Earth. And I said to my mum and dad, I want to be like that. That's what I want to do. And that week, my mum found the local drama club, which was at Dagenham and Redbridge Football Stadium in one of the function rooms, and took me there, and then that's where I started drama, and it just kind of developed from there. I mean, my initial plan growing up was to be an actor, to be a comedy actor, and then that just naturally became stand up when I actually became an adult.
So did you, if you were studying like drama and things, did you gravitate towards the comedic roles, or did you always end up put in those roles, or did straight drama just not seem appropriate for you?
Yeah, when I say studying drama, like I went to a drama club and then I did drama at school, but I was always put in the comedy roles, and if there was any other sort of performances at the school, I was like the funny character and was trying to get laughs out of. If I ever wasn't that, then I would find the comedy lines in that. So yeah, it's always been there. And I was just very lucky. I had parents who were like, okay, that's what you want to do. Let's push you towards that.
Yeah. So what path did you take then? Did you do a course, that sort of thing?
So I went to university to study drama eventually. And this when I was about 18, I'd always, as I'd grown up, I watched a lot of comedy. I would have considered myself like a real comedy fan. Yeah. Actually, to go back a few years, when me and a friend, my mate Pat, we were big comedy nerds, and we also liked to drink. And this is like 16 years old. You know what I mean? We're sort of discovering booze and being lads, and but we liked comedy, and we wanted to drink, and so we found a comedy night in London. We lived in Dagenham, so it was about an hour on the tube. And we kind of realised that comedy clubs at the time were way less likely to ask you for ID because very few underagers were going into comedy clubs. So it was kind of perfect for us. So we would go to Shepherd's Bush to Knock to Bag comedy night, and watch stand-up. That was, I think, the first time we probably went, we were 16. And we did that and then we went to a few different ones. We went to Comedy Store a couple of times. Went to one in Stoke Newington. So, I already loved comedy, and, learning that, live club comedy being, sort of some of the first experience of seeing stuff. Yeah. When growing up, what I had was what was on telly, or, a Lee Evans DVD. And then suddenly you go to this little room and there's actual people you've never heard of, and they're hilarious. And so it was already there. And then when I went to university, I was studying drama, and I did there was an open mic music night, and I played just some silly comedy songs, and the person, it was at the Students' Union, and the manager of the Students' Union said, why don't you run a comedy night here? And me being 18 years old and just full of beans and confidence, I said, yeah, I can do that. So I got a bunch of my mates, all of whom were mostly studying drama as well, and just said, we'll put one on in the Students' Union. So it was me and 5 or 6 other lads. None of us had done it before, and we put on a night. It was mostly our friends who came along, and that was all of our first like ever time properly doing a gig, but it wasn't really a proper gig. It was to our mates, but like it was enough of a dip of our toe in the water to go, oh, quite like this. So then we set up the Comedy Society at the university, and would sort of run that gig once a month. And then after a year or so, kind of went, well, we probably need to do this in an actual comedy place. So booked into the local open mic at the Stand Comedy Club called Red Raw.
Yeah.
And that was that. That would be about 15 years ago now.
Yeah. So having done gigs in front of broadly mates, what was it like stepping out in front of a real audience, if you like, for the first time, and what reaction did you get?
I'd love to be able to tell you, but those early gigs, I was a big fan of the old Dutch Courage. So a lot of my early shows, I mean, I wish I'd have more deep insight for you about what it was like 18 years old and the difference. But to be quite honest, I was a fan of the source, and I really felt at that time, I was like, well, this is all part of it. You get drunk, and that was what I thought at first. You get drunk and then you do comedy. That was what I love people like Doug Stanhope, and you know, I thought that's what he was doing as well. And so that those first few years are a little bit blurry.
Were there any things that you'd experienced that surprised you? Did you have expectations going into doing stand-up?
I guess I was surprised by how many good comedians there were who I had just never heard of. You know, it felt like, especially those early days, I would go to gigs and there would be guys who I'm like, oh my God, you're amazing. And they've never been on telly, or, you know, to me at the time, that was like, why don't more people know about you? You're so funny. And I feel like that would happen quite often at first.
Yeah. What about yourself? Did you go in with a persona? Did you have the type of comedian that you wanted to be in mind?
I was never that sure. Like, and it's something I still struggle with. When people say, oh, "What kind of comedy do you do?" And I now with fringe shows, it's a little bit easier. But I always still have struggled with that question, because there's a few like very particular brands that some people can say, oh, I do dark stuff, or I'm a one-liner. And then there's a lot of like, I guess it's observational storytelling, but then there's a bit of this and that. And so I was always kind of in that area where I always found it a bit difficult to define.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like your on-stage persona kind of was just an extension of me. It wasn't that different to who I was. I believed most of the stuff I was saying, and so yeah, it was never a big character for me.
Right. Having done drama to an extent, you went into doing stand-up rather than sketches or characters or clowning and that sort of thing. What was the appeal of like a person standing alone with a microphone? I
was in total control. You know, with acting, something that I found difficult was you would have to, you know, auditions would come in and you'd have to read the play or the script, and well, I don't like this, I don't think that's good, you know. Whereas with stand-up, it was 100% my control. Everything. I just felt it was really pure. It was something I want to say something. I can go tonight and say it and gauge the reaction immediately. And with comedy in plays, you get you do get an instantaneous reaction. You don't get that with drama.
Yeah.
But there's the feedback loop is so instant that it's really, I find that really gratifying.
Yeah. Well, what about that feedback then in a broader sense? Because obviously, you know, you make a joke, you get a laugh, that's an instant reaction. But what about reviews? How do you feel about that sort of feedback? And is there anything that stands out in your mind?
So reviews, I wish I could be one of those people. Like, you meet acts and they're like, I don't read any reviews ever. I just ignore it. And like, I'd love to be one of those people, but the truth is, like, I do in my weaker moments, during the Edinburgh Fringe, I will be Googling my name and seeing if any new reviews have come out. And, that reviews are a part of it. They are an unfortunate part of what we do. And, you know, if you're lucky, you have a production team and they can manage all that for you and they can read your reviews and find the quote and put it on your poster. But I self-produced shows for years, so I kind of had to do that myself. Yeah. I've had the odd bad review. I've mostly been pretty lucky and either had, you know, it was all right or it was good. But there's been one or two that have been bad. And actually, when they have been bad, I've managed to find the funny side of it. I remember I got a 2-star review from someone called Business Insider magazine, which I'd never heard of. And I read it and I was just struck by how little they'd understood the show that I was doing. And then, so that was a real relief of like, well, you didn't get it, bro. So I'm fine with someone who writes for Business Insider magazine not finding me funny. Like, I'm not hurt by that. If it was The Guardian or something, I probably would take it a lot more personally. But, you know, I'm not writing a show for businessmen. What I do find more difficult, actually, is like the online comment feedback.
Right.
People are so much more brutal online than they ever would be in real life. Well, we know this from Twitter and everything over the last few years. But posting clips is a huge part of stand-up, and it's something I've done a lot of. And if a clip picks up steam and suddenly goes viral, it's putting your face in front of, you know, sometimes millions of people who they just don't really see you as a real person. They don't really see, they don't consider that it's actually you who's posting it and reading the comments. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes people there say crazy stuff, you know, about your looks, about, you know, just sometimes you just get not funny and stuff like that. And that sometimes it can be more difficult because you're just out and about, just enjoying my day. I'm just walking my dog, and then I open my phone and someone's calling me a twat, and I think, well, I don't deserve this. So it's up and so the feedback, yeah, I mean, it's good. The immediate feedback in the crowd is good to sort of know whether or not something works, but like the broader versions of feedback, the reviews and the online comments, I think I could do probably without, but they are a necessary evil.
What about the other end of that, when you receive accolades? You've taken some gongs in recent years. How do you feel about awards and that sort of competitive side of the industry? I mean, are you a competitive person?
Am I a competitive person? My wife would say I am. But it depends. I hate it in comedy. I really hate it.
Right.
I hate what it does to everybody, including myself. I hate this, you know, we're coming up to the Edinburgh Fringe or this will be out when the Fringe, this is coming out near the end of the Fringe, I think. So by this point, maybe the awards nominations have already come out, right? And I hate what it does to people, especially when the nominations come out. What you'll have is a bunch of very deserving people who have gotten an extra thumbs up from the industry for doing a really great job, and well done them. And then you have a lot of other people who will feel like they didn't do good enough because they didn't get that industry thumbs up, and that their art is somehow lesser, and that they didn't try hard enough. And it just doesn't work like that. It's not effort based or even meritocracy based, really. It's like, particularly the Edinburgh Comedy Awards, is like the whims of like 8 people in a room. And, you know, if you've seen 12 Angry Men, for example, we know that like all it takes is like one person who is quite passionate, one person who saw your show one day and just took a bit of disliking to it, or even, you know, when whittling down 10 nominations, goes, oh God, you know, it's really hard to choose 10 out of this 11, but that person had that one joke I didn't like, so I guess we'll just cut them. And how how small the actual decisions they make and the reverberations of it mean that someone then doesn't get a nomination and is sat there going, "Oh, I guess I'm terrible." So I hate it. You know, I think that the Fringe would be a lot better without it. Now, that is not to say I do not myself, come Fringe time, obsess over it. That's my biggest weakness at the festival, particularly if you have a show that is doing well and getting really well reviewed, because the way comics talk to each other, they say, if you have a good show, one that's, you know, getting some buzz, comics will say to you, "You're going to get nominated." You know, they say that to you in the bars and at dinner, and that can't help but get into your head. And so you try to go, "Oh, this is not why I'm doing it. It doesn't matter. That's silly." But the Fringe is a roller coaster, and you get taken along, and before you know it, you're being thrown down into Space Mountain, and everything that you said you wouldn't think about or talk about or obsess over in July, it's now August, and you have done all those things. So I think awards should not exist for art, full stop. I unlike the audience feedback, I don't think it's a necessary evil. I think we would all be better served without it existing, but they do exist, so we have to try and make our peace with it.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you've been doing comedy for some years. You've done a lot of shows at Fringe, but a few years ago that all stopped. So having been doing shows and then lockdown is imposed on you, how do you deal with that time, that prospect of comedy ceasing to exist?
Yeah, I found it really miserable not performing. You know, I had a year off stand up. I did, you know, a sort of online streaming and stuff, which wasn't really performing in the same way. But it kind of gave me a bit of a sense of community. But it didn't. It was no match for live stand up. So I missed it greatly, and it kind of showed me that I think I will always, whatever happens. You meet some acts, and you know they get a big TV job or they start getting film roles, and you kind of realize, oh, they'll probably never do stand up again. You know, you look back at, you know, people who did The Fringe during the 90s, and a lot of them you go, I didn't even realize they were stand ups. They're actors, you know, whereas the pandemic and me missing stand up made me realize that I probably will always do this in some respect. So yeah, I found that pretty difficult, but it was good to reevaluate your love for something and be reminded of that when things are open again and you can do it, that, oh wow, aren't we lucky to have this most of the time, bar another pandemic.
Yeah. When you came back from it, I mean, how different was it? How different were you? How different was the comedy industry, if at all, if it had changed?
I mean, there was an adjustment period because when we reopened stuff in Scotland, there was still like 2 meter social distancing. And so audiences had to, you know, it was a bit weird for the first 6 months, but people just got used to it pretty quickly. There was a sort of like theory that did the rounds for a while that like audiences didn't know how to behave post-COVID. And, you know, I thought that was a lot of nonsense, to be honest, because I thought audiences have always largely been animals who don't know how to behave. Well, most of my worst experiences with audiences at gigs have been pre-pandemic. So I thought that was one of those things that maybe it's fun to sort of do some pop psychology about and say, oh, actually, people forgot how to behave during COVID. But when I thought about it, I didn't think it really stood up to much. What else had changed? I guess for me, post-pandemic was when I started to step up my own career. But I had been sort of, you know, writing shows, doing gigs, writing a show, do a gig on a sort of year cycle. And I think after the pandemic, it gave me an extra boost to start really pushing myself in terms of getting my name out there and getting known to people in more in England and traveling down to London a lot more for work and slowly building my sort of nationwide profile. Pre-pandemic, I was pretty like, I gigged occasionally in England, but I was in Scotland most of the time. And so I guess post-pandemic was the point where I thought, no, you know, I love this and I haven't had it. So now's the time to really go for it.
Yeah. obviously we've been talking about Edinburgh, and we'll come back to it again. But during the Fringe, that's a real sort of cultural melting pot. Lots of international visitors, and of course you've performed far and wide overseas. How is your comedy, or how do you adjust your comedy to be received by different cultures and different people with different references?
Yeah, good question. So I learned basically the hard way. In 2014, I went and performed at the Adelaide Festival in Australia. And this was at a point where really I was basically exclusively gigging in Scotland. And then I went and gigged in Australia. First time gigging abroad. Remember my first gig, I was doing a two-hander with another guy. I had to do half an hour. And most of my material was about being an English person living in Scotland and was, you know, an English person noticing Scottish references and stuff like that. And I learned very immediately. I got the immediate feedback loop from the audience that day that nobody cared because they'd never heard of the things I was talking about. So that was a hard learning curve, but a useful one. Luckily, having done 7 or 8 hours at the Fringe, now if I do an international show, I'm able to sort of go through 8 hours worth of material and think, right, what is reference free and what is universal, and or you know, what can I just do a quick swap for? Oh, in England, say home base. I'm in Australia, I'll say Bunnings. So generally, I found that audiences are the same.
Yeah.
Apart from in 2 instances, when I was in Amsterdam, I remember the guy who ran the club came up to me beforehand and said, have you gigged in the Netherlands before? And I said, no. And he went, oh, just to warn you, people in the Netherlands do not laugh. And I was like, what? And then I saw the guy, there was a guy on before me and he was dying, he was bombing. And I thought, well, no wonder they're not laughing. This guy's terrible. And then I went on and yeah, they didn't laugh. They don't laugh. And it was a really horrible 15 minutes. And then after the show, all the audience came up and spoke. Wow, we thought that was really funny. That was great. And it turns out they're just not loud laughers. So that's one cultural difference. The other one was a couple of years ago, I did a comedy festival in Reykjavik. And it's a very small, Iceland's very small population. And they don't have, now they do have a bit more of a comedy scene, but at the time the comedy scene was really in its infancy. And the only kind of comedy shows that happened there were basically, you know, Ricky Gervais is doing the Opera House.
Right.
So they'd never had a sort of club night of comedy. 3 or 4 comedians and an MC. So, and this is what this festival was. It was 15 comedians going over and doing 3 or 4 shows over a weekend. And so I was hosting, and, you know, I realized very quickly, this audience have never seen a host before. This is just before the explosion of crowd work clips as well.
Right.
So it just never really happened. There would just never really been an option or opportunity for them to see an MC do crowd work. And so it was as if they were watching magic. They were just, it was probably the easiest gig I've ever had in my life, because it was like gigging to children. It was just, it was great. I wish all my gigs were I wish most of my gigs had been people who've never seen it before, because it'd be a lot easier. The standards are so low. But yeah, that, as I say, it's developed a lot more now. I think there's an actual comedy club now in Reykjavik. This was maybe 9 years ago, but yeah. So generally, I find international audiences to be, you know, fairly similar in different places. Americans and Canadians are. I'll tell you one more difference. In Britain, the audiences, if they don't know you, there's a sort of like, right, we'll see if this guy's funny, you know. And it's you'll notice a lot of comics in UK, very strong opening lines a lot of the time, because it's so important to get your audience early, because they're thinking, well, if this next guy might be shit. That's like the sort of standard British thinking. This guy's probably going to be shit. And then the act has a strong opening line and proves them wrong. I found in America and Canada, the assumption is that you're going to be good. Well, he's a comedian. He must be funny. And And so you have a bit more freedom off the top when they don't know you, because they're just like, well, I'm sure this will be good. And that is why when you watch American sitcoms and TV shows and they're clapping and cheering and, you know, believe me, it's annoying to watch when you're at home and you see audiences going crazy before anyone's done anything. You go, oh, grow up. Come on, for goodness sake. However, being on the other end of it feels fantastic.
Yeah.
When you're on stage, people are clapping you before you've said anything. You're like, this is great. I see why people do this.
What about you? Do you still watch comedy? Are you a good audience member? Or do you sit there with your arms folded, nodding along, saying, yeah, that's clever. See what you've done there.
I've got a big laugh. I know that. And last year I didn't do a show at the Fringe for the first time in many years. And I decided to go and, because I live in Edinburgh, to go and watch as many shows as possible. And it really sort of re-triggered my love for stand-up. I watched, I think, 50 shows or something crazy like that over the month. And yeah, I think it's very easy to become a bit, because you're always gigging and so then you have a night off and maybe you don't want to spend your night off in a comedy club. And then before you know it, you realise, I haven't watched a show in 6 months, you know? I'm gigging 5 nights a week, but I haven't sat and watched and just enjoyed comedy for a year. So doing that kind of reminded me of like, oh, this is really good. And also it's good to actually try and really understand the audience's perspective sometimes and just sit, like, how does this feel? What is this like to watch? Because if you're a comedian, you're often watching from the side or like the very back of the room, but actually just going and trying to really think, right, I'm a punter. What is this like to enjoy as a random member of the public? If you remind yourself of that, then I think that's beneficial for your performance.
Yeah. Is it easy to get jaded by being a comedian, by being it sort of behind the curtain all the time? And does seeing comedy like that as an audience member, as you've described, I don't know, reinvigorate you, re-inspire you for the future? Well,
the standard of comedy that I can enjoy has to be much, much higher, because I get, you know, I'm gigging every night. I see a lot of acts, and I see a lot of bad stuff that I hate. You know, like I see a lot of stuff that I think is not good. So like there is that element of jadedness. Like if I went to a random open mic somewhere on holiday, and the standard was not good, I don't think I would last very long. But then the flip side of that is going to see. I sat and watched a preview last week in Ireland. I was doing shows, and my friend Alison Spittle was doing a preview of her new show, and so I sat and watched it, and she's so good, and the show is so good, and I was really blown away by it, and so that I feel like is a really invigorating experience, and that sort of wipes away any jadedness. I think a lot of the acts who are really jaded are probably feeling that because they're not making the effort to go and watch the really good or really interesting or new stuff, because it's very easy to let that slide and just go and gig and then only notice when someone's doing something you hate. But I think actually making the effort to go, oh, I've heard this is good, I want to see it, and maybe challenging yourself and going to see stuff that you don't know anything about, or going to see some theatre shows or some poetry or other stuff to try and inspire you, I think can probably stave off that jaded feeling.
Yeah. Well, let's talk some more about festivals then, because we've obviously Edinburgh has come up and it will come up again, but also Adelaide you've mentioned. So what's your festival experience been like as a whole?
So, I mean, it depends on the festival, really. Like, living in Edinburgh, I have a sort of unique perspective on the Edinburgh Fringe, because the festival comes to me. So for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I'm moving to a different country for a month to perform. I don't know what my accommodation is going to be like. I'm living with these two comedians, and one of them's a bit crazy, and I don't know what my venue's like. And, you know, I don't really have any of that. My accommodation is my house, right? So I and my flatmate is my wife and my dog. And so I already have a bit more, and I'm not spending the crazy cost that people are being charged. I'm just spending my normal mortgage. So the pressure is slightly reduced because I don't have that as much financial pressure, and my home is my home, and I'm not surrounded by other comedians, and we're just talking about comedy and the festival and awards all day. So that has made it probably slightly easier for me, definitely in terms of the financial stuff.
Yeah.
But I sometimes feel like, oh, am I missing out on an experience, a festival experience, by living with the comedians and staying up late and talking shop and all that stuff. So when I have been to the Australian festivals and I have experienced that, it's been a novelty for me that I've really enjoyed. I've lived with guys who I really like and get on with, and because those festivals are not quite as high pressure as Edinburgh, and because it's far away in this distant land, and it kind of feels like nothing really. I feel like less affected by everything over. If I get a bad review in Australia, would mean nothing to me, because I think I don't live here. No one I know cares about this. So like, it's 40 degrees every day. I'm going swimming in the morning. I'm living with a bunch of comics. I'm doing a show. Like, that is so much more relaxed, and it's much more enjoyable for that. Yeah. So generally my fringe experience has been good. I mean, I've had my early fringes. There were some tougher ones. I was in a sketch group very early on, and I did a run at Just a Tonic with it was 2 guys and a girl in this sketch group, and we were dreadful. And one of the guys was in a relationship with the girl, and then like 3 days before the fringe, they had a really messy breakup, but still had committed to doing the fringe. So it was just in this really toxic environment for a month of them like arguing and swearing at each other, and then putting on a bumblebee costume to go and sing Teenage Dirtbag. To nobody. We sold terribly as well. I have had that fringe, but also I've had the fringe of not doing the shows, just seeing stuff, and the fringe of doing shows that have gone really well. So I've kind of had every kind of fringe festival. And I definitely prefer the ones without messy breakups and sketch groups.
So let's talk about this year then. As you say, this episode is coming out towards the latter part of the fringe, but you will be taking that fringe show on tour. So let's have the elevator pitch. What's the show? What can people expect?
So with all my shows, what I try and do is talk about something. There's kind of 2 types of shows, right? There's a guy being funny for an hour, a guy or a girl being funny for an hour, and there's like no theme, and it's just they've just written a load of jokes, and those shows are great, and I've written shows like that. And then there's shows that are sort of a bit more in vogue now, which is the thoughtful storytelling. It's got a sad bit, theatrical fringe show. And there's kind of a bit of a war going on between people who do one. There's like festival comics and club comics, and there's this like this feud between the two about what it should be. And I disagree with that, and I actually think it can be both. And so that is what I try and do. What I try and do is write a show that is a story that can make you feel more than laughter. I want you to learn something, and I want you to think about stuff, and occasionally, be sad, get emotional, but punctuated with good, strong laughs the whole way through. And I think if you do that correctly, it can be an incredible tool to talk about difficult subjects in a really accessible way. So when I tour, I go to comedy clubs. I want regular people to walk in off the street who've maybe never heard of me before and see the show and go, I've never seen anything like that before. I want them to be challenged, but ultimately come away going, that was really, really funny. But also there was these 1 or 2 things that I've never thought about, or is a similar issue to something I've had in my life that I relate to. So yeah, comedy, like good hour of punctuated comedy with a sort of with substance, I guess.
Yeah. So at the festival, people will come to you to see that show, and you're in residency for like 25 plus days. When you're
Mm.
touring, you're then taking that show out to other people. I mean, how does that differ for you? Are you a person who loves to tour, or do you prefer when you set up shop and set out your stall and have everyone come to you?
So the really good thing about the doing it 25 days in a row
Mm,
at the same venue is like you just get to know the space and you get into a routine and the show just gets really perfect.
mm,
You find the beats and the extra second of pause and the little tags, and it just gets so good. If you're going to see someone in like the second or third week of Edinburgh, you're seeing like a really good version of that show.
mm.
When you're touring, it can be slightly different. Sometimes you've never been in a room before. Sometimes you've been stuck on a train for 6 hours. You haven't had time to eat before the show.
Mm.
That's not to say it's bad. Some of the best shows I've ever done have been tour shows, but there's a few more variables that can make it like a bit trickier, but also better. I mean, sometimes your venue at the Fringe is not good, or your room is not good, and then you get to an art space or a comedy club or a theatre to do your tour show, and oh my God, this is the perfect room now for this show. So it's just different on tour. I like staying in hotels. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm pretty good at spending time on my own. That's fine. I like doing a gig, going back to my hotel room, getting on Deliveroo, ordering a gigantic pizza, and really going goblin mode. There's something so beautifully anonymous about sitting in a hotel where I can behave in ways that I would never in my own house. For fear that my wife might see, Liam, why have you ordered 2 pizzas? Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to eat 2 pizzas on my own in a Holiday Inn, and I'm going to love it. I guess the only aspect is whether or not you have support can be a big part of touring as well. Like, if you have, some people will take a support act on the whole tour, and you're in the car together and you're traveling together, and it's like you have that companionship the whole time. Sometimes you don't have that, and that is where it can be a bit lonely, is when you go to a venue, you meet the staff, you tech, you go to your green room, you then do the show, it's good or it's bad, and then you leave, go to the green room, you say goodnight to the staff, and then that feels very strange, that there's no one to communicate with about what's happened there in the room. Even if you have a support act who you're not traveling around with, who just turns up, doesn't open in 20 minutes, and then you do your tour. There's at least a bit of how were they? That was good. They're like this. God, this room's a bit funny. There's just something to communicate with the weirdness of what stand-up is, and sometimes you do lose that when you are properly on your own. Those are the only bits where I do feel a bit alone, when you have those moments where you're going, God, I've just rocked up into an art centre, done a show, and then pissed off, and that's it. I'm just done.
Given that, then, do you feel like you have a comfort zone, which might be in the sense of doing the writing or doing MCing? I know you've been a long time MC at Monkey Barrel, or doing an hour, be that hour in a static location like Fringe or on tour. Do you have an area in that in which you find you're at your happiest?
I honestly think it changes depending on how much I've done it. So at the end, I'm going into 25 days at the Edinburgh Fringe and then a tour. And by the end of that, I think I will probably really enjoy MCing after that and being a bit more free. But then, I took a year off writing a show. And so coming into this, I really enjoyed the process again of starting from scratch and writing and going to new material nights and doing 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there and learning about the shape of the show and finding out the story I was going to tell via what was working. And so that was really satisfying then. So I think it really depends on what I've been doing, about how much I'm enjoying it and how long I've been doing it. It's good to, I guess the variation is what keeps it fresh and exciting.
Yeah. And in recent days, at time of recording, you've had your special come out live at Monkey Barrel. Has that been a large objective of you to have a special? I know everyone talks about having a special these days. Or do you have other objectives? Do you set regular targets for yourself?
Yeah, I kind of do have like sort of long-term objectives of stuff that I would like to do, and they're all kind of dependent on other sort of dominoes falling down first. But I mean, that special, you know, I was doing comedy. I've been doing it a while, and when I started, you know, only really famous comics had specials, and now, like you say, it's everybody's releasing. You know, you might have someone, if they had a really good fringe show, it might go on Next Up or something. You know, when that started, but now it's like people do their debut show and then they film it and it goes on YouTube, and there's a really good power to that, because I do think it's really sad that so many brilliant acts have worked so hard on shows. They do it at the Edinburgh Festival, and then it's just gone, disappeared. There's no record of it. There's no trace of it apart from some 3-star reviews in the Scotsman. So I do like that they're recorded, but I kind of realised, wow, I've got 5 of those shows that have never seen the light of day, and I didn't want to, you know, I've developed as an act, so I didn't want to relearn and re-perform, you know, 5 different hours just for the sake of getting them filmed. But I did feel like there's probably a lot of material in those 4 or 5 shows that I think probably deserves to be recorded in some sense and released. So that was where the idea of the special came from, was let's just get a lot of this old material down onto a big public platform, so that if people find me and say, this is what this is an hour of just jokes. This isn't one of those big storytelling shows. This is just an hour of fun material. I mean, and if you've got it in your back pocket, then why not? And kind of, you know, a bit more cynically, one of the ideas there was, if you've got an hour of clubby stuff mashed together from 4 or 5 different shows, you also have an hour of potential clips to cut up and put on Instagram and TikTok and maybe go viral with a couple of times, which is, you know, all part of it now and a big part of building your profile. So that was the sort of goal behind that, getting that special filmed and releasing the way that we did.
Yeah. Do you ever keep anything in for yourself? Jokes that's to make yourself laugh? Stuff that might not even have played particularly well in a room, just to keep yourself amused?
Yeah, there is one. There's a few. There's a few lines that, like, I know don't get laughs, but there's something. There was one I did in the last show. I say, I think it's when I was like 33 or something. I say, I'm 33 years old, which technically means I'm in my 30s if you want to be a dick about it, right? Which no one ever laughed at it. I think it doesn't really make sense, but it's something about it just really amused me, that, you know, basically just not accepting that you're 30. There's a couple little daft lines like that. There's another one in this new show which doesn't get a laugh, but it is, I can't really explain it because I would need to basically do the show for you because it's like reliant on a lot of things, but it's like a thematic callback.
Right.
So it doesn't get a laugh in the room, but there is something so pleasant and satisfying about saying this particular thing at this particular point that I kind of, I feel like I want to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like a sort of, look at me. Isn't that clever? Right, which it might be just creeping over into self-indulgent now I've said it like that. But there are, I think you've got to, I mean, I laugh at myself a lot, especially when I'm emceeing. People comment on that. People say it on my crowd work clips, he's laughing at his own jokes. I'm like, well, yeah, I just thought of it. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't laugh during my fringe show. I've heard it 100 times. But if I'm emceeing, sometimes there was last night I was hosting, and there was a French couple in who met doing improv. And so I said, oui, which is French for yes and, right? Which I was like, I was really like, I was very impressed with myself for improvising a joke about improvisation in French. And it was like, I would say about 20% of the room really appreciated it, and the other 80% did not understand what had happened. But yeah, I mean, I think trying to make yourself laugh is, if I'm laughing, then I love it when I see a comedian laugh. You know, as long as it's genuine. Sometimes you see acts and they're kind of, you notice they've got a kind of a fake laugh within a joke. And when you see it, it kind of go, oh, that's not real. That feels gross. But seeing someone enjoy themselves is like joyful, right? When you see someone being playful and silly and laughing, I think that's infectious. So yeah, I've never been afraid to laugh at my own gags.
Yeah. This is something that's come up before about being present in the room. You're engaging with people and you're communicating to them. So in that sense, how important is improvisation to you, whether it be emceeing or interrupting your own show for a bit of banter? How present is improv as part of your show?
So because I like emceeing and doing crowd work, and it's a skill I've honed, in my hour shows that are mostly material based, I try and build in a couple key points that just give me an excuse to talk to an audience member.
Yeah.
And I try to make it a bit more ambitious than what do you do, where do you come from? So in my last show, I had a big routine about these headphones I wear to sleep at night. And so I would ask people, I'd get the audience to put their hands up, who listens to something to go to sleep at night? And then I would ask people what they listen to help them go to sleep. And it was a really brilliant question because the answer was always funny because it's something that I think is quite personal and people don't really talk about. And so whether it was white noise, which is easy to sort of make fun of because it's such a loud, aggressive noise, or the people would just the crazy things people watch to go to sleep. People would watch, I watch The Big Bang Theory every night, or I watch Dungeons and Dragons streams on Twitch to help me go to sleep, or I listen to audiobook of, and if it's an audiobook, what audiobook you listen to, and invariably it was always some sort of serial killer thing or something. So I think I always try and build just little bits into shows where I had that opportunity to remind everyone that we're in a room and that this is live.
Yeah.
And so that if you've seen my show that day when the guy said Dungeons and Dragons, then you've seen a show that no one else has seen. And I think audiences go away from that, especially if you've been funny in that moment. That makes it go, that show today, specifically, was for us, And I think, I get a buzz off that, and I think crowds do too.
Yeah. Do you think you've learned one single important lesson over the years that you carry with you that sort of informs your philosophy, if you like, going forward?
Yeah, if you ever need to use a public toilet, push the cubicle door open very, very slowly. That way, if someone is in there and they've forgotten to lock it, they will have the opportunity to say, stop, before you see them, and it's very embarrassing. That's my number one lesson that I've learned. In all seriousness, with comedy, I think it is, if you want it to be your job, treat it like a job. And it's very easy, and I do sometimes do this, but it's very easy to phone in gigs, especially like as you climb up the ladder, the gigs that you used to think were really important become slightly less important because there's other more important gigs. I mean, there was a time when my dream was to host the open mic night at Red Raw at the Edinburgh Stand. That was like, I saw that as that's the peak, right? And now, I don't do that gig anymore because it's a Monday and I want to have my Monday night off. But like, just because you have, maybe climbed a few rungs of the ladder, when you do end up at that night, give it the same respect you did when you first did. No gig is beneath you because of where you are at. And it's something that really bugs me. I see with comics sometimes and they turn up and it's not like you have to wear a full 3-piece suit for every gig, but it's like sometimes you go to a club and it's like, you just rolled out of bed and just sort of half reading notes off your phone. And I'm always just think, this is show business. Like, regardless of where you're at, people have paid to watch a show. So do your job. Like, try to, entertain the audience. That's what you're here for, overall. So I guess that's my big one.
Yeah. You've touched on a few of your experiences, but what do you think so far have been the best and worst single experiences that you've had in comedy?
So the best would be a couple of years ago when I did a show called Chronic Boom at the Edinburgh Fringe, and it was about some time I spent in hospital. I have a chronic illness, and I wrote a kind of quite an elaborate show about it that had a lot of things that you wouldn't normally see in a comedy show. There was like lighting changes and costume changes, and it was broken up. It was kind of a bit of a cross between a comedy and a theatre show, but with that club comedy that I spoke about. Yeah. And that went really, really well. And that was when I first started getting some sort of mainstream national attention and got reviewed in broadsheets and signed with a big agency and got to do my first tour. So that was the big stepping point in my career, and it was with a show that I'd worked really hard on and really, really loved. So that felt really good. And yeah, probably the thing I'm still most proud of.
Yeah.
The worst. That's tough. I mean, yeah. Previous to that, there were some tricky times. I mean, actually, that show was on the back of a really hard time because I'd been in hospital. I just left my agency, and I at that point really felt like I was gigging pretty regularly.
Yeah.
I'd work every weekend. I would pay my bills through comedy, and I always said to myself, if this is as good as it gets, that's still pretty good. My dad was a postman for 40 years. His back is knackered from dragging bags up and down council flats in East London, and I'm complaining after having to go and do 20 minutes at the Frog and Bucket on a Friday night. Like, who do I think I am? I always try to remember that. And so I always said, if this is as good as it gets, that's pretty good. I'm paying my bills from talking. But then it got to a point where I thought, oh, maybe this is the ceiling, because I felt like in a year or two, I hadn't really made any progress. I'd left an agency. I couldn't get a reply from any other agents. There was clubs I was trying to get in with. It wasn't working. And I felt a bit of a dead end on the back of having a big health crisis. So that's probably the worst I've ever felt about comedy. Now, the decision then was to go big on this next show and talk about a lot of that and use that as the drive going forward. So that worst moment ended up being the drive that would then sort of blow into the best moment.
Yeah. So how can people find out about you and the show and the tour and where they can come and see you?
Best way is to get me online on Instagram at Liam Withnail. But if you don't have online, that's fine. The tour's being produced by Berg's Nest, who you may have heard of some of their previous acts, including now world famous Richard Gadd. So I'm going to be at the Edinburgh Fringe. If you're at the Edinburgh Fringe, you listen to this, come to the show. It's at Monkey Barrel. If not, it's touring all over the country. If you live in a shithole, I'm probably coming. That's not true. I'm coming to lots of very nice places. But yeah, or check out the special on YouTube, Liam Withnail live at Monkey Barrel. Even if you don't have online, I'm sure someone can lend you a phone to watch YouTube for an hour.
So we get to my final question then. Liam, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Comedy, yeah. So funny that you briefed me with this question and then I've spoken about it. So, I really enjoyed talking about this for an hour, but it is so difficult to define. What is comedy in a nutshell? Well, it's kind of what I said. I think it is, and I think it's important to remember, it's show business, okay? And I think it's important to remember the reason you do it is not just for your own self-fulfillment. It's to make people laugh and enjoy themselves and to forget about their lives for a moment. And if you can do that in a way that is also self-fulfilling and artistic and interesting, then great. That's the goal. That's what, you want them not just to laugh, but to think. If you can do that, fantastic. But never forget that you're only there because of them. And the second you go too far into the self-indulgent, they'll leave you, So I guess that's it. Remember, shine your shoes, go to work.
Liam, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. Really enjoyed it.